Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Managing Editor of Canada's Podcast, talking today on Calgary's podcast with Craig Senyk, who is Board Chair of Mawer Investment Management in Calgary. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mario.
Well, let me just ask, just first of all, before we get into talking about philanthropy and social investment and all that stuff, but tell me just a little bit about Mawer Investment Management and what you guys do.
Yeah. Well, that's my day job, Mario. That's what allows me to do my my night job. So, Mawer Investment Management, we were founded in 1974. So we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. Founded by Chuck Moore. And we manage money on behalf of pension plans, not-for-profits, foundations, individuals. And we do this globally with offices in Calgary, Toronto, the US, and Singapore.
Okay, let me ask a little bit about you, Craig. How did you get into all this? I imagine as a little kid growing up, you probably didn't think you'd be in an investment area.
No, not really, Mario, because I grew up in a small little town north of Edmonton called Newbrook. And the reason you haven't heard of Newbrook, Mario, is because there's only about 100 people that are in Newbrook. So my dad was a truck driver. My mom worked at Home Hardware. And I dreamed of leaving the small town. And I did that in the mid-90s, went to the University of Alberta, not really with an idea of what to do. And I thought maybe when I went to U of A, I'd be an accountant. I took my first accounting class and realized, no, I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. And stumbled into a finance class and immediately fell in love with finance. And following university, I moved down to Calgary and started working at what then was known as TD Greenline. So that dates me a little bit, which is was then the discount broker for TD. And it was at TD that I got to meet the fine folks at Mawer Investment Management. They were starting to receive money from discount brokers and really didn't know much about that. And I had them come over and do a talk on international investing to our clients. And following that, they invited me for an interview. And 27 years later, here I am.
Oh, excellent. Now, a big area for Mawer is social investment, and I noticed that your three kind of pillars are education, healthcare, and basic needs. Tell me a little bit more about that and the why behind that.
Yeah, well, first of all, we are an independently owned organization. So we have over 80 owners at Mawer Investment Management that all work here on a day-to-day basis. So we really, as board chair here, I think of us having four stakeholders within the organization. Obviously, we have our owners whose capital is on a line here every day. We have our clients that allow us to do what we do, and we manage over $90 billion for clients across North America. We have our employees, and we have over 250 employees, as I said, in 4 locations. But probably most importantly as well is that we also live and work in the communities and those 4 communities, and they're an important stakeholder. They give us a social license to be able to do what we do. So it's a big part of what we want to do is to give back to our communities in those three pillars. So very important piece of the success of Mawer Investment Management.
Why is it important for businesses in general to give back to the communities that they operate in?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I kind of joke a little bit, given that we just came through the hockey playoffs. Mario, is I grew up in Edmonton and as a big Oilers fan, and it used to shock me when I'd go to an Oilers game and the Maple Leafs or the Canadians were in town and they would cheer louder for the and you knew this was not Torontonians or people from Montreal coming to cheer for their team. It's local people, and so I'd say you got to support the community that you live in. And so when I moved down to Calgary, I immediately started cheering for the Oilers, and I realized, oh God, I'm a little bit of a hypocrite here. It's so, eventually I transitioned over to the Flames, much to the chagrin of my friends. But if you think about it, I've our organization and the people in Calgary have been successful because of living and working in Calgary. So it's a natural part to recognize that success is because of the community we are allowed to work in. And so it's important, I think, for organizations to give back to their communities. And, whether, I view it now not on a city basis, but on an Alberta basis. So, I still have a love for Edmonton and an obvious love for Calgary, in Toronto as well, into the US and Singapore. And we give back to each of those communities. And, another area I'm involved in personally is with the Theatre Calgary in town. And that's an example of, the more that we have a cultural sector in Calgary, the more it makes this a world-class city, the easier it is for us to be able to attract and retain talent from around the world to want to come to Calgary to work and obviously have a life here in Calgary.
Canada's podcast is your gateway to success in the world of entrepreneurship. Start listening today. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
You mentioned Theatre Calgary, and I know recently there was the big announcement of a major donation by Philanthropists and Calgary entrepreneur David Workland for the Arts Commons redevelopment. But I wanted to ask you about guys like him, and guys in historically in this city, like the Doc Siemens and the Harley Hodgkisses of the world, and Bud McKay. You can go on and on and on. Like I guess in Calgary, wouldn't be Calgary if it wasn't for what a lot of these people, philanthropists, have done over the years, right?
Well, absolutely. And, you listed off, half a dozen names there of people that helped inspire and I view very much as mentors and, the next generation that has to, continue on the legacy that they've built in this community as well. And I don't think they would disagree with me. I hate the word philanthropist, Mario, because to me, philanthropist means giving money away without necessarily return. And, I grew up as an investor. And when, I look at us giving money into the community, I still view it as doing it as an investor. And whenever we give money into the community, I very much view it as we get a return on that in terms of building a better life, whether it is Theatre Calgary or the National Music Centre, the Alberta Cancer Foundation, the Children's Hospital. They all give us a return to have a better life in Calgary. And so it's very much, I'd like to retire the word retire, because I don't think we should ever retire. I think we should retire the word philanthropy, and it's very much continuing to give and invest in our community.
You think I rattled off some names there, and they're people from another generation, but do you think the generation after them have followed in their footsteps?
Well, I like to think I'm part of that generation, Mario, and I think there's, a lot of people like me that, aspire for a world-class city and aspire for excellence in everything that we do, whether that's professionally or personally. And part of, what we want to do as well is to inspire the next generation and behind us as well. And so, there's a budding, millennial generation as well that's been able to find purpose in life, do a lot of great work in terms of technology and energy as well, and they're starting to do great things in our city as well. So it's definitely a multi-generational success, and what we want to do in terms of really build a great community.
Where do you think, on a personal level, Craig, where do you think this kind of philosophy was rooted for you?
Well, it probably goes back to growing up in a small town, Mary. As I said, I grew up in a town of 100 people. That was my entire life until I was 18 years old and went to university. So, I grew up in a town. I knew everybody. Everybody knew me. It was very hard to get into trouble because, it was just, you knew it was going to get back to your parents, so you just didn't.
Yeah.
I remember once, when I was 16 and got my driver's license, and I was coming home on a gravel road from school, and lost control of the car and flipped it. And then had to walk back to a farmer's place. And I knew somebody drove by the car and saw that it flipped, because news got back to, Newbrook before I was able to call back there. And that's just the reality of a small town. So it was very shocking to me, when I went to the University of Alberta. My first university class had 400 people in it. And the person I sat next to, I started talking and, thought that person was going to be a friend, and I never saw them again. It was just the reality of university, right? And so, that sense of community that you have growing up in a small town, I very much view that of what we're trying to do in a big city these days, is create a sense of Newbrook, create those small towns in a city where people can come together. And, I view it unfortunate in terms of social media. And, we have two, major wars occurring in the world right now with Russia, Ukraine, and Israel and Palestine. And, I know there's just not a sense of community amongst those countries. Otherwise, why would you fight? And I think the more that we can, as I said, create Newbrooks around the world, and that there's going to be a better sense of people to come together and solve problems as opposed to create problems in the world.
You think? Do you think that there's a longing for that small town, say, mentality, especially when you start getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And whether you're in Toronto, Vancouver, now Calgary at one point, whatever it is, 1.6 million people, that lure to that small town reality gets even bigger as we get bigger.
It is, but we can really do create communities within a big city. We've all been doing that for generations and generations. But it's and as you do that, there's something called the Jambur rule, that as you get over 150 people in your life, that it becomes tougher and tougher to create those connections, right? And so, I very much view that as a challenge. Is that we all probably have a community of around 150 people, but how do you grow beyond that, where you can still have that sense of community? So, I see that as a challenge, Mario. Probably science is going against me with that one, but if you got any advice in terms of how to create a community as you grow bigger within your community, and as you said, as cities grow bigger, that's what I aspire to figure out.
Yeah, it's like those little neighborhood bars, right? Like a Cheers,
where everybody knows your name. Absolutely, yeah.
Exactly.
So I mean, it doesn't have to be a bar; it can be a park or a library or whatever it may be. And there's been studies that show that communities that have those social gathering places, whether it be a bar or library, coffee shop or whatever it may be, have actually longer lifespans than communities that don't. And so I think that's a stat that, should resonate with a lot of people.
Stay ahead of the game with our expert tips and strategies that will help your business thrive in a digital era. CanadasPodcast.com. Subscribe now.
That's an interesting point too, right? When you think about it, is that more and more we're seeing stuff like that taking place, whether it's in malls, shopping centers. They like to become social gathering places as opposed to just a straight a transactional place, right? And developments, right? Sort of mixed use developments out there that they're trying to create that sense of like a gathering place. I know that even the Stampede, for years has worked on that to make it a gathering place beyond those 10 days, right?
Yeah, 100%. And, one of the things I talk about here at work a lot is that, I host a call every Friday. It's a virtual call. It's once again, you can create community physically and virtually these days, which is great. So I host a call every Friday, and that's once again, it's a sense of bringing the 200 employees at Mawer together. It's a fun little thing where we talk about what happened during the week. We introduce new employees that are coming into the organization, where we can poke a little bit of fun at them. We play music as well. I ask people to to recommend a song, because I think people's song choices as well gives an insight into their personality. And then I always close with the call with, I say, look after your mental, physical, and social health. And to me, those are three important things that lead to longer life spans. Mental health, you can do that, in terms of what you eat and taking time away just to focus on the mind. Physical health comes through exercise, and social health is everything else that we've been just talking about, is creating infrastructure, whether it's virtually or physically, like you talked about the Stampede and other ways that we can bring together, because, we do need that sense, whether we're introverts and extroverts, to be able to connect with other people.
Right. Tell me, Craig, about Calgary Jamboree for charity.
Oh, yeah. So, this is something we do personally. This is just another way to create community as well. And so the purpose of the Jamboree for Charity is twofold. It's to raise the profile of Canadian musicians. I have a passion for people that are passionate in what they do. Musicians is one aspect of that, that are just passionate about what they do. In many cases, they don't make a lot of money at it as well. And I also have a passion for things I can't do. I'm not at all a musician, so I love having people in my life that are. So it's twofold, as I said, to raise the profile of Canadian musicians, and then the second thing is to give back to a local community-based charity. So this past year, as an example, in June, we had the likes of Jim Cuddy, Lindsay L, Tim and the Glory Boys, and a couple of up and comers in Alberta, Donna Merrill and Mariah Stokes. So it's this blend of up and coming musicians, established musicians, raise the profile of all of them. It's a free event for people to come out to, and we asked them to give back to a community-based charity, which this year was the Radiance Society, which provides shelter and programs for children and women that suffer from domestic abuse. And we raised over $370,000 for the charity and put $130,000 back into the hands of Canadian musicians. So we do that in Calgary. We just had our 12th year here in Calgary, and I figured, a big part of it is Canadian country music. If I want to raise the profile of Canadian country music, best to do that on Bay Street, where they have no idea what Canadian country music is. So we've been doing that now for 7 years in Toronto as well, right on Bay Street.
Oh, wow. What, when you look at Calgary, these days especially, we've gone through a challenging time. Everywhere's gone through a challenging time. What is it, do you think, about Calgary that I guess demonstrates that resilience that, we've gone through boom and bust cycles, but we just keep going, right?
Yeah, you know what? I'm very optimistic on Calgary, Mario. This is a podcast for entrepreneurs. Calgary is arguably probably the most entrepreneurial city in Calgary for sure. And in order to be an entrepreneur, you do have to be resilient. And I think, we learn from those bust times, Mario, and we come out on the other side stronger for it. And, right now, there is so much going on in this city that's entrepreneurial and leading to us being a better city. You talked about Arts Commons transformation. So, that's going to be the largest performing arts center in Western Canada when it's done. We have a new library, the National Music Center. We got Glenbow that's going through a major transformational project as well. So that'll be the Arts and Cultural Center of Calgary. We have a new convention center and a new events center on the Stampede grounds, which is, is going to be a hub of conferences and concerts and sporting events there as well. And one of the most interesting things as part of the downtown transformation as well that we're seeing as well. And, my wife noted this when we came downtown a couple of weeks ago on the weekend. She goes, just look at, how many people are walking downtown. And that's because, we've had this project that's, it's getting a lot of press globally, as well as transforming a lot of our office buildings that we overbuilt for into residential activity. So we're creating a hub of residential activity here as well. And so, I'm very optimistic on Calgary for the long term because of that entrepreneurialism and how we learn from a lot of that boom and bust that you talked about, Mario.
Okay. And, we know, and Calgary has been called a very entrepreneurial city over the years, and a number of small businesses here are quite huge, quite a huge number. What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs?
Oh, yeah, I'm probably the last person to give advice on what to do with entrepreneurs. It's, it sounds a little bit trite more than anything else, but, the people that I see most successful in my life are those that just do what they love doing, whether or not, it's financially rewarding or not. But, because I have a lot of those people that we support in the community. We talked about the musicians that we support. We also personally support 4 Olympic athletes as well. And, there's another, group of people that do what they love doing, but there's just not a financial reward for it as well. And those are amongst the happiest people I know. They're not, the most financially well-off people in my life, but they're amongst the happiest people in my life, whether it's musicians and athletes and in the business community as well. It's those that are most successful that, just they find something they love doing and they just run with it. And they find a way to overcome incredible odds to be amongst the best at it. And so, as I said, do what you love doing and figure out a way to be the best in the world at it.
All right. Thanks very much, Craig, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mario. That was fun.
All right. That was Craig Senyk, who is board chair of Mawer Investment Management in Calgary. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's podcast, today on Calgary's podcast. Thanks for joining us.